do you experience a different attitude towards money from men than women in your line of work?
Communicate with their creditors, because that's the thing. Is essential to let them know what your present situation is. It doesn't make any sense hiding. It doesn't make any sense not speaking up.
So we know that studies have found that depression and anxiety, people who suffer with those two, are more likely to be in debt.
We got a lot to talk about today, because the whole topic that we're looking at is money and also mindset. And we're going to be tackling issues in regards to how our attitudes towards money, how people are feeling right now with the financial insecurity that's in play. And so we're going to be merging your expertise to come up with maybe even solutions of what we can do to kind of bring a little peace of mind and maybe some action for some people who may feel a little helpless at this point in time. I'm going to start with Melinda.
Sure.
Let's talk about money. This is a very, very vulnerable time for people. And so I know you work with a lot of individuals and companies. What is the word? How are people feeling? What are they telling you?
Well, they are feeling anxious about this present pandemic. There is definitely a level of uncertainty. So people are trying to figure out, like, where am I going to put my money? What's going to be the priority right now? How are we going to survive throughout this period? And will there be actually a financial future to think about? So there is some level of anxiety and worry, I would say. In some instances, sometimes it may lead to feelings of despair as well. So people are feeling a little iffy right now.
And Bertrand, when you hear all those emotions that people are going through, well, what does that say to you as a psychotherapist, especially for the psyche? What is the association that we have with money that may propel or even compound on those feelings that Melinda just spoke about?
Well, I mean, of course, I think we have been socialized as a people to believe that money equates power, money equates life, money equates happiness. Money is everything. And so this is a time where it's really challenging to comprehend a life that is equated to happiness without money. So this is really sending people into a sort of spiral in terms of what do I do next? And it makes sense because a lot of the issues of mental health have to do with socialization, not just in the micro level in terms of your family, but on a macro level in terms of what society attributes to mean success. So we know that studies have found that depression and anxiety, people who suffer with those two, are more likely to be in debt. You know, that's a study says that if you suffer with depression and anxiety, you're more likely to be in debt because you're unable to rise up with the mindset that you need to survive. And then we also know, according to the World Health Organization, the leading causes of disability are mental health. In terms of mental health, we're looking at 1, depression, and 2, anxiety. So we can see that when it's surrounded with a loss of your job, people are already globally struggling with depression and anxiety. That's the number 1 form of disability in the workplace. And now secondly, we know that when you have that, you're more likely to be affected in terms of your career longevity, your ability to bounce back and get on track. And I think it's the silent killer. You know, we can't see it. You know, people are really struggling within, and then there's a stigma attached to it even more so. So people aren't ready or willing to come out and say, hey, I'm really struggling. So there are multiple factors that are affecting the mental health right now.
So then, okay, so you talked about debt. So let's look at the possible scenarios that can take place here. Melinda, there are issues of debt, liquidity, investment. Where should we be right now? And what are the complications that come with each? And then Bertrand, we're going to talk about each and what that could mean for the mind.
Yes.
Right. So go ahead, Melinda.
Sure. So in terms of what should take priority right now, especially those who would have been laid off or those who would have been terminated. So the challenge is that, okay, well, my income is basically stripped away. So what am I going to do right now? In some instances, there may be employers who would pay out their staff for that period, if that actually does occur. But then there's some who have nothing, basically. So this would be like where they could communicate with their creditors, because that's the thing, is essential to let them know what your present situation is. It doesn't make any sense hiding. It doesn't make any sense not speaking up. It doesn't make any sense allowing those bills to pile up if you don't say something. So that's the thing to deal with. In terms of servicing your debts, that's if you are able to, what you can do is pay the minimum amount due. Of course, I always talk about this, just paying the minimum amount due. What happens here is that they're not putting the full amount, they're just taking interest off and then putting the rest onto the loan. If you're accustomed paying more than the minimum amount due, that might have to cease right now. You want to make sure that you're liquid, that you actually have cash on you. If you have an investment portfolio, for some of you who may have that, it wouldn't make sense right now to cash all of your investments all at once. I know that financial markets are governed by behavior, i.e. people. So if there is a panic and, people will want to sell and take their money off, but just know that eventually things will improve and people will become more confident and things will pick back up. So you don't necessarily want to dissolve all of your portfolio. And then even at this time, just focus on the essentials. Like I said, try as much as possible to stay away from online spending. I know boredom might set in, and I know the therapist will take care of that. So you want to make sure that you avoid these things. You also want to ensure that you're still investing in your development, and it's not going to cost money because they're actually making courses available online for free that you could actually use. So I think that that's what it is right now, what people should consider doing at this present point in time.
I want to touch back on something you said, because all these points are extremely important. And one thing that stood out to me is a matter of communication. And Bertrand, this is where I'm going to come to you, because the ego can get in the way. When it comes to finances, people don't like to talk about their finances or their finance. They don't want financial transparency at all, even with their spouses. So to communicate and go into a bank or talk to people or basically ask for help, how can we guide or how can we navigate the ego in this whole process?
That's really challenging. It really is challenging, and it even extends based on gender constructs that we live at. So for example, as a man, if you have a family and you're supposed to supply to your needs of your family and you are unable to, it's going to be really difficult to walk into a bank and say, I really need this money, or to go to someone who you need help from. Because I think sometimes we look at this in terms of how we define masculinity. Going to your father to ask for money if things are going hard is like, you feel as a man, even there, because that's what mental health is about. It's quite often the constructs that we live by. So then it starts there in terms of, I feel as though I can't even reach out for help. So I think what people really need to do is to practice things that are very calming for themselves, to really stop and slow down. There are some tools that are very helpful. For example, with mindfulness. Mindfulness means that you're living in the present state and you're focusing on what's happening now. Another technique could be writing out, like writing down, expressing your feelings about where you're at right now in life, because you aren't alone. And I think when you're able to kind of harness your thoughts and center yourself and focus on what you really are feeling, it's more likely that you'll be able to make better decisions. Because one of the biggest challenges right now for people is that they can't see the future. Life is really spiraling out of control. We don't know when this is going to be over. We don't know if we're going to have our jobs tomorrow. We don't know if our family is going to be there. There's a lot of uncertainty. And we know that the research shows that whenever people have a lot of uncertainty in their life, that's when they want to do something temporarily to bring that release. And that release might, as Melinda said, be spending more money. And then you tend to go down into a more negative place. Yeah.
I'm going to ask you a question now that we're talking about spending money.
Yes.
You know, when the pandemic really came into play and people started going to the supermarkets, and people were talking about, people were, hoarding or, buying in bulk. Talk about the human nature of that when it comes to crisis and the habits that we tend to, adopt.
Honestly, a lot of it had to do with fear of the unknown. And I think as humans, by nature, naturally, we respond with fight or flight, as that's a built-in hormone for us. So when people were getting the messages of what's happening, yes, some people were very level-headed. They were at home. They were just, drinking their water or their juice. And they're like, I'm not going to go out and worry about it. But for some people, they were hearing different messages. And I think that's where it's also important in terms of what news sources we listen to. I think we keep hearing it, but we can't reiterate this enough, because I think mental health also has to do with what you're getting in and the constructs that you're creating. So I think a lot of people got the message that this is going to be a serious disaster and you need to do something now because something will not be here tomorrow. And that's a human response. And I can't go too hard on people for responding like that, though it seemed as if it was something very funny and hilarious. But we can see that people were tapping into these survival mechanisms that they knew. And so it had a lot to do with what messages they were getting. Perhaps people were getting WhatsApp messages saying, hey, this is going to go bad. Perhaps some people were getting messages from some of their friends saying, you need to go now, the supermarket is full, and they're buying out everything. And I think with all of those messages coming in, then people were reactive. And again, that's why I go back to the importance of slowing down our thoughts. There's a practice called cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and it really focuses on, firstly, controlling your thoughts, because our thoughts create feelings and then our feelings create actions. So when the thought entered into the mind of you are going to lose everything, if they could have blocked that thought right there and say, you know what, it's going to be okay. There's a large amount of supply of things that are going to still be coming in. Everything is going to work out, and tap into some of their coping mechanisms. It could have stopped that from turning into a feeling. And then that feeling is fear. Oh my goodness, everything is going to be so loud. Oh my goodness, I'm not going to have the things that I need. And then when that feeling was allowed to run on and it activated, then next came the action. And so people would stand in long lines, people waiting, because genuinely it was that human response of fear and things going downward, indeed.
So we're talking about fear, and everybody handles fear differently. But sometimes there are some kind of prototypes of or versions of fear that are typical within, for instance, gender. So Melinda, I know you deal with all these different types of clients, male and female. And this is where, Bertrand, you and Melinda are going to have to just talk to me about this.
Yeah.
Melinda, do you experience a different attitude towards money from men than women in your line of work? And has that kind of even transcended over into this COVID-19 pandemic on how people ask you questions, or how they are panicked or they're fear?
All right. I can tell you straight off the bat that most of my clients are females.
Really?
So I have a few males that come to me, and that's when they're willing to seek the help. And it's only when they're ready to admit that there's an issue, they're going to come to me and they're going to sit with me. But women, I find, are more inclined to come and get their affairs in order. And I've typically had sessions with women who are professionals, they're entrepreneurs. So that means they're very goal oriented, and they want to make their financial lives better. So that's what I have noticed over the period of time that I've been working with my clients.
Bertrand?
Certainly, I want to answer this. Yeah, I mean, it's the battle of the sexes here.
I'm saying.
But I love it. I want to say, though, that indeed we do have general trends in terms of how men and women behave. So, for example, we know that generally, and this isn't, we can't label it to be this way, but we know that generally men may be less expressive about some of their challenges and women may be more expressive. And from that route, we can see what leads to depression. Depression looks differently in a male versus a female. In depression with a female, she may more likely cry. The research says she may more likely talk about how she's feeling, but that's because she's been socialized to do that. Whereas with a male, he may keep it inside and he may even display anger. So those are two very different symptomatic types of things that we see when it comes to the way that it's expressed. But what I can say though is I'd like to go deeper, because I think that there are places where things actually work out differently. So for example, I think as a psychotherapist, one of the things that we use is a genogram. And a genogram is a sophisticated term to say a family tree. But a genogram is where we trace back to the past. We go up 3 generations backward and we look at what was happening in the family at the time. And I think I would like to throw in that what also affects the way that men and women treat with money is the types of homes that they grew up in and how money was introduced to them at young ages. What are their thoughts and feelings around money? Because that's why you may have situations, I think we all know situations where the woman spends a lot, and we know situations where the man spends a lot. But what I can say is that a lot of the times it comes out of how people understand money and even how money is used to bring happiness. So for example, something that could play off is that a woman might go shopping online at this time and she may buy a whole bunch of shoes. You know, women say they love shoes. That could happen, not all the time, but it could happen. But a man, he could go to buy alcohol, you know, and those right there are 2 coping mechanisms. A man spending money on alcohol because that's what men are often seen at bars, you know, not dealing with issues. Those are 2 ways that it could play out in terms of the gender differences as well. And so that's something that we want to look at in terms of how men and women look at it. It has to go back to, yes, what are the gender scripts that society has taught us? Because in the Caribbean, we have a specific gender script around manhood and what it means to be a woman and masculinity and, you know, a bad man thing, you know, and the women, you know, there's another script in terms of a powerful woman who could take care of my business. There's so many different scripts, but we have to look at, as a society, what are these scripts? How are they affecting us negatively? And what are some of the positive things that we've learned?
And if I might add, I do the same very thing with my clients. I look back in their history. I ask, what was it like growing up? I ask, what was your relationship like with your mother? What was your relationship like with your father? You know, so they tell me what the interaction was like. I would always ask, what are the examples that you would have seen in the home? So like in some sessions, like it helps them to understand that what they saw in the home or what they learned in the home is why they behave the way they do with their money right now. And it goes back rightly to what he was saying earlier.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's amazing how gender can, and how we were raised, and the narrative that we were given as children molds how we are as adults. And it is a big topic. I think is an important topic in the Caribbean, because we are not letting our men express themselves. We're not creating the environment for men to feel vulnerable and willing to do so. And that's why, in my opinion, I think when it comes to domestic abuse, when it comes to alcoholism, that kind of stuff, they are when they don't feel good about themselves, nothing is going to be right.
And I can't say it enough. The worst part about mental health is that it can't be seen visibly all the time. So people are definitely having a really rough time. Losing your job at this point means that you've lost control.